Welcome to the capital of Serbia, Belgrade, for this new edition of Europe District, our monthly magazine on EU enlargement. Key parliamentary and presidential elections were held in the country in May. Our reporter will tell you what the results of the vote will mean for Serbia's chances of joining the European Union. The timing is very important. Serbia was given candidate status by Brussels in March, and we will ask Serbians what they expect from the European Union. We'll also tell you why a popular Serbian comedy is changing old stereotypes about the country's gay community, and we'll meet Merjan Bajic, a sculptor, who will take us for a walk through the streets of Belgrade. It's a very vibrant city. Well, let's move to our first story. It's nothing short of a revolution here in Serbia. Outgoing President Boris Tadic was defeated by the nationalist Tomislav Nikolic in the second round of the presidential election. Tadic has ruled Serbia for the past 8 years with a pro-Western, pro-European agenda. Observers fear the election of Nikolic, once famous for his anti-Western rhetoric, will undermine Serbia's chances of joining the European Union.
Supporters of newly elected President Tomislav Nikolic flood the streets of Belgrade. But no one expected they would have anything to cheer about. The leader of Serbia's Progressive Party was not tipped to beat incumbent President Boris Tadic, a fervent pro-European. However, Nikolic, a former ultra-nationalist, has recently rebranded himself as pro-EU.
This was not a referendum for or against the EU, but to resolve internal problems that were created by Tadic and the Democratic Party.
But opponents of the new president doubt the sincerity of his commitment to Europe. Nikolic served as Deputy Prime Minister under strongman Slobodan Milosevic. Some analysts are worried Serbia could fall back into nationalist policies. Alcid Tadic issued a warning to his successor.
As Serbia's former president, if my opinion still counts, I call on all political currents to preserve this country's strategic direction towards the European Union.
It's a direction that Tadic spent his 8 years in power trying to push toward, winning points with Brussels by handing over Bosnian Serb war criminals Radovan Karadzic and Ratko Mladic to the International Criminal Court. A courageous move some doubt Nikolic would have made.
Actually, if you look at Nikolic's record when the country's made strategic choices, like the parliamentary declaration on the crimes committed in Srebrenica, we didn't always see a clear commitment from his party.
Serbia won EU candidacy status in March. Milica Delevic oversaw the country's EU application, but she's concerned the new president will undo all the hard work.
What is known about him is that he used to be an opponent, and now he is a supporter, but I think joining the European Union requires much more than just saying that you want to get there. You should really say what you are ready to do and demonstrate it in concrete steps so that the country can move there. And there, I think, still some doubts remain.
Doubts that are fueled by an alliance made before the second round of the election between Nikolic and the Democratic Party of Serbia, who's deeply Eurosceptic.
If Serbia wants to enter the EU, if it wants to adhere to the EU, one of the conditions is that Serbia must also recognize the independence of Kosovo, and that is a price we don't want to pay and can't pay.
But in the end, it wasn't Europe, but the economic crisis that won Nikolic the presidency. With a 24% unemployment rate, Nikolic blamed much of Serbia's current financial woes on his predecessor.
You shouldn't work so that only politicians enjoy the good life. Of course not. But the rules of the game were destroyed in Serbia. They've been destroyed by their lies, their promises, their threats.
But in a country where the president has a largely ceremonial role, his policies will depend on the makeup of the new coalition.
Our reporter on the results of the elections here in Serbia. For more on the story, I'm glad to be joined by the Foreign Minister of Serbia, Vuk JEREMIC, Mr. JEREMIC, thank you for having us. As we saw, Tomislav Nikolic won the election. Is this bad news for Europe?
I would rather define it as a protest vote. It's a difficult economic moment, and across Europe, people are struggling. They're going through a hard time, and I don't think that the major factor in the high showing of the main opposition party was their orientation towards Europe, because even them have said that if they get elected, they would continue with the European process. It was much more to do with the economic governance, but I'm glad that the composition of the parliament is such that when it comes to the coalition making, I expect more of the same. I expect continuity.
Serbia was given candidate status by the European Union in March. What's next? When do you hope to start accession talks with Brussels?
I expect that by the end of this year, we're going to be able to get a date. I don't know when this date is going to be, but this date is going to be fixed. But before the end of this year, I think it is going to be possible to muster the necessary consensus amongst the 27 member states of the European Union that an explicit fixed date for the start of the accession negotiation is given to Serbia.
Let's address the main sticking point with Brussels, Kosovo. Your country still refuses to recognize the independence of Kosovo, and Serbian officials have warned it will be difficult to reach an agreement with Pristina on telecommunications and energy, though this is a pre-requirement from Brussels to start accession talks. Are we heading towards deadlock?
You know, this dialogue is not an easy dialogue, but this is the first time in the history of the Balkans that people are trying to resolve an issue of this gravity and complexity through peaceful negotiations. And, you know, some breakthroughs have been made so far. We are going to address all these outstanding issues, the ones that you mentioned as well. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, but I'm an optimist that if there's goodwill on both sides, and I'm sure there's going to be a goodwill on behalf of the European Union that is a broker in these negotiations, that we're going to continue making progress.
Will you ever accept the independence of Kosovo?
No.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel has called on Serbia to dismantle the so-called parallel structures in North Kosovo. They still rely heavily on your help from Belgrade. What do you respond?
As far as we're concerned, the parallel structures are the one in Pristina, because we have our constitution. It's a very clear-cut constitution. It's a democratic constitution by a peaceful democratic country that is a member state of the United Nations. And parallel structures in the context of both our constitution as well as the Security Council Resolution 1244 would make the institutions in Pristina the truly parallel institutions.
So you're telling me it's acceptable to finance the structures in North Mitrovica?
It would be anti-constitutional for us to stop doing that.
Vuk Jeremic, thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.
It's a consequence of the breakup of Yugoslavia, which will take you more than 9 hours to travel by train from Belgrade to Sarajevo, a distance of 400 kilometers. The line was suspended in the early 90s during the siege of the Bosnian capital. It reopened 4 years ago, and it's regarded as a positive example of reconciliation between Serbia and its neighbors.
It's early morning at Belgrade's main train station. Passengers are waiting to board a train that reconnects three countries torn apart by ethnic division and war. The destination is Bosnia, first stop Croatia. It'll take 3 hours to make the first 100-kilometer leg.
I'd love to drive 300 kilometers per hour, but they need to repair the railways.
It's a far cry from its previous grandeur. Formerly known as the Olympic train, it was once the pride of Yugoslavia. But the track was abandoned when war between the former Yugoslav republics broke out in the 1990s. The line was re-established 3 years ago to boost reconciliation. But new borders make the journey more complicated, with a change of driver in each country.
I've never driven to Sarajevo, so I can't tell you what it's like, but my older colleagues have been, and they have fond memories of it. Here in Serbia, we're all very Yugo-nostalgic. Well, most of us.
Once popular, these days a train only has a few passengers on board. Few are willing to make the 9-hour trip between Belgrade and Sarajevo. However, this man chose this route over flying because he wanted to experience the symbolic journey.
To me, now it's a new way of building the relationships, you know, because we are neighbors. We must have a strong bonds between ourselves.
But some passengers want the reopened track to be more than just a symbolic gesture. This man is nostalgic for a time when trains were moving freely across Yugoslavia.
How can you travel normally when there's only one train per day? And on top of that, it's always running late.
But that's not the only reason the journey takes longer. The locomotive changes over at every border crossing. First in Croatia, then when it enters Bosnia, and finally between the two Bosnian entities, the Republika Srpska and the Federation of Bosnia-Herzegovina. And that's not to mention passport control.
Don't worry. There's only one more until you reach Sarajevo.
In total, passengers have to get their passports out 6 times throughout the journey.
If someone had said to me there would be this much control, I never would have believed them. I was born at the time of Tito, and back then you could sleep on the streets without anything happening to you. But now there's this division.
Passengers also have to show their ticket after each crossing. It's no wonder controllers would like to see more cooperation between the countries.
It would be better for travelers, but one day we will all be in the EU and there will be no more border controls.
But while there's still a long way to go to return to the train's glory days, railway officials are proud they've got this far.
So far, there's been no financial benefit, but that wasn't the goal. We don't expect a huge amount of passengers. Neither do our neighbors. All our partners are happy that this process works and we get to reconnect after being cut off by war.
After 9 hours, the journey nears its end and reaches its final destination, the Bosnian capital, Sarajevo. But for these railway workers, it's only just the beginning, the first step towards a brighter future.
I don't want anyone to experience what we have experienced here in Bosnia. This horrible war. But now we have a chance to boost ties. This new connection between Sarajevo and Belgrade is a sign that we are moving forward, towards Europe.
2 decades after war stopped the train service in its tracks, it's hoped it will help get these countries back on the path of reconciliation.
Is Serbia coming out? A comedy about shady war veterans providing security for a gay pride march has attracted over 500,000 viewers across the Balkans. It's a paradox in a country where homophobia remains deeply entrenched. But activists say Parada has launched a debate about the rights of homosexuals in Serbia.
It's the story of an unusual friendship between Lehman, a nationalist homophobic gangster, and Radmilo, a gay vet. What brings them together is Sugar, Lehman's beloved pit bull terrier, who's injured in a drive-by shooting. What follows is an improbable story in modern-day Serbia. Limon, a former soldier, agrees to help protect the gay pride parade that Radmilo's boyfriend plans to organize. Actor Goran Jeftic hopes his character will advocate a change in attitude in his country.
They never saw one kiss or one touch or one something, and after, I don't know, half hour in that film, they are like, aha, okay, so that people, they are the same like we are.
Funny and tragic at the same time, Parada is a powerful plea to denounce homophobia. The idea came to director Srđan Dragojević after the first Serbian Gay Pride was held in 2001. The event was marred by violence, with extremist nationalists attacking the parade.
We believe that after Milosevic, the new era is coming, and suddenly you are watching the scenes of violence at the streets of Belgrade. So I was kind of deeply shocked and in a way offended, and I promised to myself that one day I'm going to make a film about that issue.
But he had to wait almost 10 years before he could make the movie. The next Gay Pride only took place in 2010, during which this scene was filmed. This time there were 6,000 police, one for each participant. But violence still ensued. For gay rights activist Lazar Pavlović, the film is a step in the right direction. But he still feels there's a long way to go before he can be openly gay in his country.
I think the holding of Gay Pride in Belgrade relies heavily on the willingness of authorities to protect the participants and organisers, but this film has allowed some viewers to change their perspective. It's helped calm tensions towards us.
But despite this, the parade was banned again last year, with the government citing security reasons. And it's still uncertain if gay activists will be able to take to the streets in 2012.
It's the end of the first part of Europe District. We'll return after the news break and we'll continue our journey across Serbia.